Hey, good people, how you doing? Welcome to 254 Rugby. This is another edition of the Armchair Analysts. My name is Michael Kwambo, and joining me as always is Kibui. But Kibui, how you doing?
Doing all right. It's a little chilly in Texas, and we have some random fog that came out of nowhere. So we're just entertaining some conspiracy theories, but other than that, doing good.
Great. It's equally becoming colder here in Seattle. Temperatures becoming cooler, but like you were dissing me just before the show, this is the one place that it rains. So I think we're back to default settings.
Mm. At least your air is nice and crisp out there. It actually tastes different. So enjoy that.
Definitely gonna enjoy that. Now, let's get straight into the business of us being armchair analysts. And this past weekend was the HSBC Sevens third round, the Perth Sevens. Interesting rugby over the weekend. Great rugby all round. We did see Australia, the home team, making their way into the final, and you know, losing in the final. But away from that, there was good rugby all round. I know we'll talk about Kenya at some point, but just generally, your take on the rugby sevens that we saw on offer in Perth.
The quality from team 1 to team 12 is fantastic. There aren't any runaways like there were like in previous seasons. Everything was pretty tight at the pool level, and there were a couple of upsets here and there, what some people would term upsets, but the quality of rugby was really up there. The women's rugby too. I caught a fair number of women's games too, and just the quality, the hands, the lines, the speed, it's beautiful to watch. And for me, one of the biggest things was just seeing Kenya being given their own corner, being the super fans that they are, and the massive following in Australia. And I'm glad to see that they've made Kenya a big part of it because we are the life of the party. So I enjoyed that. Saw our old buddy Amitati from UT1 over there, large as
First,
life.
first body, you two one, and also Ebitati was with me in Kakamega High. He was behind me, but yeah. So we call him first body when he came to KCB. Uh, but solid chap, and
I
like you
asked for
said,
birth certificates the first time I saw him. I said, "This guy cannot be. This is a man."
I tell you, those are the specimens that we've always been breeding way out in catch.
There
Now,
you go.
let's talk about Shujaa. I felt the performance was heroic.
Oh yeah.
There's lots of arguments here and there, but I think where they are is they're in their rightful place, without any disrespect.
Yeah.
And at some point, I feel as though they're punching above their weight, because if you look at the caliber of their opponents, the caliber of the preparations that their opponents had, Shujaa literally had nothing, and still to give a scare to Fiji, even New Zealand, and then of course
Yeah.
pull off the win over Uruguay in the pool stages. It shows what can be done when Shujaa is operating at 100% capabilities.
I agree. And go figure that Onyala hasn't really gelled all the way back in with the squad. And he was, 2 seasons ago, he was the be all end all of the team. Now he's just a piece that you plug in and adds value. But I think I agree 100%. Their ranking right now is right where they are in the form, as concerns their form. And I think that for them to survive the playoff, which is not far away, it's going to take some special performances, maybe a semifinal. But these guys actually have it in them. I don't know. What were your thoughts on the play against in that last game with South Africa, and I think Fiji in particular? Those are the two games that were so close that we couldn't close out. What did you take from those two games?
Was it South Africa really, or
No, no,
New Zealand?
the last New Zealand. Sorry, it's New
Yeah.
Zealand. Sorry, yeah, New
Okay.
Zealand.
There were two games against New Zealand. There was the opening game and the last game. I think in the first game, I need to go back to the beginning so that I can talk about the end.
Sure.
So looking at the first game where Shujaa lost 29-14 to New Zealand, literally it was a blow for blow kind of match, pound for pound, as they call it in boxing.
Yeah.
14-14, and then the moment when Kevin Wekesa was ahead of the kicker, I think just took the wind out of the Shujaa sails, because at that moment New Zealand came back and scored three unanswered tries to win it
Yeah.
by 29 points to 14. And as somebody who writes sport, it's one of those things that you define as the scoreline betraying the quality and the closeness of the game. And then against Fiji, I mean, looking at the players we had there, really unfazed by Fiji. I remember in the past, I need to take you back to the 2014 season when Paul True was in charge, and Shujaa playing against Fiji in Las Vegas. The series hadn't yet moved to Los Angeles.
Okay.
That game is always memorable in my head because Shujaa lost by 52 points to 5. And do you know what
I
happened in
was
that
there.
particular? You were there.
I was there.
Now, I remember that game like it was yesterday because Fiji played the entire game with six men. They lost a player to a red card
Yeah.
early on, but still put 52 points past Shujaa. And I remember talking with Paul True. Paul True was one of the best coaches I've ever worked with.
Yeah.
And he just simply asked, look, what do you do?
What
What
do
do
you
you
want me
tell
to
these
do?
guys? What do you want me to do? This is up to the players. You know, you're 6 against 7, you know?
Yeah.
And I feel, if I look back then, I feel that the players were either not motivated or simply overwhelmed by the Fijian persistence. Now, coming back to this game between Fiji and Kenya, it ended 21-14. Yes,
Yeah.
Shujaa, again, just crumbling at the final moment. But like I said, taking matters into their own hands and
Yeah.
being equally as expressive as the Fijians. And, you know, just a few more tournaments, a few more, what do you say, opportunities. And I feel that they can even climb higher, maybe even up to seventh. Now, coming to the game against New Zealand, that final game that you're talking about,
Yeah.
oh man, that was, let's just say it was unlucky. There's really nothing much that you can do. Yes, Shujaa leading by 12 points to 7 at the break. New Zealand coming back to lead 19-7. And then Floyd Wabwire let down by the bounce of the ball. Basically, what you do there, you've done everything right. But, you know, there's some circumstances that are pretty
Yeah.
much against you. I think they did their best, and heads up as always.
I would have liked Onyala to hold on to the ball because kicking with like two guys back there, and by the way, Wabure showed amazing gas and commitment to get there and dot it down. Just it was on the line, right? But I also look back to regulation when they had that opportunity on the right flank when there was a knock on with their try line beckoning, and so that tells you that they were up for the fight. You know, they took them all the way till the very end in the first game, and they got back up for it the next day, the day after, and they pushed New Zealand all the way. And I think that this side has all the pieces now. I don't think we had any injuries this weekend, so I'm looking forward to other than maybe Oro who walked off and then he came back on the next day, which I found absolutely amazing. So I think this squad can go, and we need to target that last spot, which is GB. Australia getting to the finals gave them a huge points boost, and now they're almost out of reach. So Team GB are the ones who are immediately closest to us at 20 points. We're on 14. So that's the spot we need to chase down. We need to hope for some tough results for them, and then we need to make sure that we at least make a quarterfinal, a semifinal. If we can do that, I think we can avoid the playoff. And I think this team has all the tools to do it. We have kickers, we have ball runners, we have creators. I think the lineout let us down a couple of times in those last couple of games. But I think those are things that they can fix because we can get them done, right? So I have high expectations for Vancouver.
Agreed. Like you, I also have high expectations for Vancouver, and let's just talk about the pool before we continue.
Yep,
And you know, looking at it, where is Kenya? Where is Kenya? I know they're in a pool
we're in that
that
first.
has Argentina as well in Pool A, France and Great Britain. And like you said, we're looking at at Great Britain as that low hanging fruit, and there's an
Yep.
opportunity to take them out in the pool stages and advance further than them, and continue to build the cause to climb up the table. That's number one, but in the event that Shujaa do not make the top eight, I still feel that they will not be relegated. I dare say that after 3 rounds, because they
Hmm.
they're looking. I mean, there's very little to separate the 12 teams on the World Seven Series right now.
I think Ireland are like completely in a rebuild. Jordan Conroy isn't what he was a season or two ago. Terry Kennedy was clearly the engine and the heart of that and the soul of that team, and I think they're missing him sorely because he gave them so much lift on the offensive and defensive side, and so it's a couple of the older guys like Roche and then all these other young guys, and I don't think three more tournaments is enough for them to gel to get to where they can push the top sides. USA are a bit of a mixed bag. They have some guys that have been there for a while. They had a really good result against Argentina. So any given day they'll push everyone, and so I think that even if we go into that playoff, I'm confident that the boys have the calmness and I think at this stage it's like you just need to be calm, trust in your structures, trust in the guy next to you, and just know that no matter what happens, we can make it through those 14 minutes and we'll get a win if we have to. So I'm confident of that. How about
Yeah,
you?
absolutely. Yeah, I am confident, and I'm also looking forward to Vincent Onyala retaining his form. Maybe just an explanation as to why he was sparingly used in Perth.
Mm,
He's been coming off an injury, made him miss the Safari Sevens, has not been active for his club as well, and is gradually being eased back into the team. You,
mm,
you could see that, yes, in as much as he didn't show much in terms of like his playing ability, you could see his leadership, taking the burden off Asati and Oro in terms of
yeah.
just like telling the players what to do in terms of situations. He was vocal, and I think that's why you need these kind of players. And you just feel that between now and Vancouver, a lot will happen, and do expect to see a lot more in terms of influence from Vincent Onyala. In terms of the team, like you said, no problems whatsoever. There is a quiet confidence about Shujaa retaining their
Or
status on the World Rugby Seven series.
switching gears, let's talk about how good Argentina looked.
Wow. Argentina are pretty much just something else. And it brings me back to something that I wanted to bring at the start of this episode of the Armchair Analysts. It was, yes, there's a series of events that's happening in Argentina. They are very conscious about their player development pathways, and it goes beyond rugby sevens. It goes into 15s. There's gonna be Super Rugby Americas, which starts in February. There's a number of Argentine sides which are playing, and I think they've got three sides, three franchises there, and they also have Uruguay in participation. I think in Brazil and Colombia, but there's I think
Chile,
eight.
the Condors.
Yes, yes, there's quite a number of teams, and now you see that there's a very deliberate effort in terms of them just growing their game, and it shows even like with the Argentine 15s, it's now rubbing off on the sevens. Now, they did have a preparatory tournament 2 weeks before the event. Of course, they spread out their players in a number of teams. One of their teams won the event. Uruguay also played in that particular tournament, and that's why they were looking sharp. Now, for Argentina in the final, this is something that they have been building on, and for them, it's nothing fancy. They are just ruthlessly efficient, and they're
Yeah.
going through the motions, and you can see it in the way they play, the way they go about their business. No surprise that they won the series in 2024.
Yeah, I think they also got a bit of a benefit because Australia kind of completely outpunched themselves to get to the final. They went to extra time. I think Hutchison went down injured. Sargent went down injured. Turner, their winger, who's been stellar for them. So they were pretty thin, and the game was tight until it was 0-0 until about maybe 4 minutes into the first half, and I think once they scored the first one, the floodgates just opened. Not taking anything away from them, but I think Australia were just completely spent just getting to the final. I didn't even think they were going to beat SA. So kudos to Australia for pushing all the way through, um, and scoring that try in injury time. The young man who's stepping up for them, Ekanyake. But I think they looked good. Uh, I think there's probably some depth challenges with Australia, but I think they're clear of us now. One other team I wanted to ask you about, and I just find it so odd, is that the New Zealand side just seems to be a bunch of old horses, the old war horses, with one or two young guys. What's going on with the recruitment there, and why are we seeing guys like Ware and Collier, and there are no young guys pushing through? What's going on there?
It beats me. The decline of New Zealand, initially I thought it would be a passing cloud and that they would be
Hmm.
in a rebuilding phase, but it's just not happening. I'm not too sure whether Sevens is being viewed as a pathway to the All Blacks, because that used to be the motivating factor under Gordon Tijans. And we must admit that since Tich left the New Zealand setup, things really
Yeah,
haven't been the same. I think that losing the allure of using the rugby sevens as one of the stepping stones to the All Blacks is really affecting the kind of performances, the kind of caliber of players that we're seeing for New Zealand. And
yeah,
I guess that there has to be a lot of introspection within New Zealand rugby to reclaim the sevens program. And then I was reading up, must have been last week, reading up something that when they failed to medal at the Paris Olympics, they also lost a grant from the one of the sports governing bodies, and the grant is equivalent to $1 million. I'm not too sure whether it was New Zealand dollars or US dollars, but whatever the case is, they lost a whole big amount of money to aid their high performance programs, which include
yeah.
rugby sevens. And these are probably the effects that we are seeing. So I think it's something deeper than what we are seeing on the field of play.
It's disappointing because the seven series is you've got your core sides. Always view New Zealand as one of the top 2-3 sides, so it's kind of weird to not see them in the cups, deep in the cups consistently week over week. But who we are seeing in the cups consistently week over week now are the Spanish side, and they've proven that the first two tournaments were not a fluke, and I think they've just absolutely built a program in like 3 seasons from scratch. The only guy who's been there for like more than 4 seasons is Paul Pla, and that guy he's an amazing player. I think he's close. He's about 30 now. Everyone else on that side is pretty young. So, what do you think we can learn from like the Uruguayan and Spanish programs, and where they are so far?
Investment, number one, but number two, have a bigger talent pool, because the biggest fear always with Kenya rugby is that we will have a team that is performing and then
Hmm.
obviously stick to the mantra of don't fix it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But we need to have a lot more players coming through, and a lot more players coming through means investing in them, getting them into high performance programs, getting them to play in satellite tournaments. You know, the likes of the Amsterdam Sevens, the subsidiary tournaments in Dubai, LA, wherever. Because this is a story. It's a bit hilarious. I'm not going to name the player, but it happened during Coach Benjamin Ayimba's time. He gave a debut to one player who really was causing waves on the Kenyan rugby scene at the time, and the team was in London in the tunnel at Twickenham. So this player who really has just been banging in tries on the Kenyan club scene is in the tunnel, looks at the New Zealand guys, and then declares that he's pulled his hamstring. You know, like I said, that is probably someone's husband now and a father. He's an uncle, a cousin. You know,
There's no shame.
yeah. So we need to protect his identity, but away from that, what's the moral of the story there? Expose your players, expose your players to these kind of environments and conditions. So sorry, I couldn't put it any other way, but it's about that. It's about exposure and investment.
You talk about exposure. I remember in the 90s, the first time I ever went for a Safari Sevens, I was still in high school. I was doing A levels, but digress. I remember we're right there by the clubhouse, and you know how the buses would pull up from the hotels with the players. And I remember, like, if you remember where Quinns was back in the day, like the parking lot was here, then it was down a level before you went into the clubhouse. So I'm just down here on this lower level, and was it London, was it London Irish or whatever it was. It was one of those teams, and these two Jungus stepped out. They were baby faces, but I think they were like 6'4", 6'5" forwards, and they were big. And I remember thinking, guy, we're supposed to play against these guys? I haven't seen people like this. No, sevens players. Like, I think our biggest guy back then was Toti, and Toti was tall, but he's slim. So I understand looking at this New Zealanders and thinking things are about to be really tight. So we'll forgive him for that, and he shall not be named, and that's okay.
Since you brought it up, I've got one more story. We toured with the U21s, late 90s, to Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe.
Yeah, so the big boys on our team, those Ongoroti, crap, I've
Slide.
named names. I'm not naming. I'm trying not to name names. Oops. Anyway,
No, I mean that's a tour. They were not scared. You can name names if
they're not
guys are not
scared.
scared.
But
Yeah.
anyway, what the thing is that we saw our big boys being smashed, and you're on that field of play, and you're like, okay, they've smashed our big boys. Yeah, and you're on that field of play, and
Yeah.
you're torn. You have to make the tackle. You can't grease because playing on the
No.
wing, you're literally on the touchline.
Yeah.
So if you grease your tackle, it's seen. But again, if we had a lot more of those kind of tours,
Yeah.
we would eventually get over that stage fright,
Yeah.
and build the confidence, get the exposure, because again, it's the little things that matter. I'll take you back to the game between Kenya and New Zealand at 14 all in the
Yeah.
opening game. You know, we have a player ahead of the kicker. I understand we've not played since Cape Town, but just we need to get ourselves into these kind of situations. You build yourselves mentally, physically, in all sorts of way. Expose the players. I think that's the best way. Invest in them, and we will be where Spain is, Argentina is. It sounds simplistic, but there's a lot
Yeah.
of science behind it. Remember, as we said, and that's the caveat for this show.
Yeah.
We are armchair analysts.
Yeah, I think we have the physical profile. We've got the speed, the physical profile. I think as we have players who take advantage of the lines better. A lot of our stuff is sometimes route one, but as we start mixing the route one with the over unders lines and the hard angles, and it's there, you can see it. It's not just in isolation where it's like individual brilliance. So I expect this side by Los Angeles to have their stuff together, and if it ends up being like the Challenger Series, it ends up being Challenger Series. I'm actually not worried about that. And so I think I was listening to the breakdown actually at halftime. That's the other thing that struck me. I was listening to Kelvin Mambua and how he was talking about strategy, and they only had him on for about maybe 15 seconds or so, but he's mixing his Sheng and his Swa and his English, and he's talking about how they're engaging us this way, so we need to avoid this. We need to push it out to the second channel. Don't get caught up. We keep the game at our pace. We don't let them slow down. So the way he's articulating in those huddles, yeah, I'm so impressed by Wambua and what he's done with this side in such a short window. And so, regardless of what happens this season, we have to stick with him. He's somebody who I can believe can push us to that next level and maybe compete for another cup, maybe even this season. I'm not going to say it's out of the realm this season. I've seen enough to say that this side is good enough and has enough depth to push for a cup this season. So
Absolutely. And as we come to the close of this edition of the Armchair Analyst, who was your standout player for Shujaa?
so Dennis Abukuse for me does all the stuff that we don't really maybe give a claim for. He's the one who took that quick tap and he offloaded the ball, right, to Anyala for that try. He does all the hard work, and I don't know. He's a back in the 15s game, isn't he? Isn't he
Yeah,
a wing?
he plays at outside center.
Outside center. The
Yeah.
guy is playing as a forward, and he's doing such an amazing job. So for me, Dennis Abukuse.
I totally agree with you, Dennis Abukuse. And in previous editions of 254 Rugby, we did big him up. And
Yeah.
just so you know, he was the MVP in the 2024 National Seventh Circuit,
Yeah.
definitely proving himself on the international stage for wow, what's for Shujaa. For Shujaa.
So
Yeah.
last thing I wanted to ask I want to big up the women, and that Aussie New Zealand final was absolutely fantastic.
Whoa, it was a
That was the
blinder.
best game of the whole weekend.
Yes, it was a blinder. I know we've had our reservations about playing the men's and women's competitions together, but still, that was a blinder. You cannot take it away. It was everything. First of all, they're cross-border rivals, even though they don't have a physical border.
Yep.
But wow, it was great rugby and a great what can I say? A great petition for the rugby sevens game to a global audience, if ever there was one.
100%.
Yeah.
So that's
All
it for
right.
me.
Yeah. All right. So we'll catch up next time on the armchair. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Cheers. I appreciate it, and have a wonderful week.
You too.